Hi all, this is Nishant Srivastava. The paper we're discussing here is Insensitivity to Future Consequences Following Damage to Human Prefrontal Cortex. The hypothesis of the paper is that the patients with damage to the ventromediate sector of the prefrontal cortices develop a severe impairment in real-life decision making, in spite of what we found was otherwise preserved intellect. Impairments are especially marked in personal and social realms. They can't figure out what if impact their actions can have on the future. Currently, we don't really have any probe to figure this out in the laboratory and the cognitive and neural mechanisms which could be causing this to happen. So in this paper, what we do is there's an experiment, a task which simulates a real life decision making in the way it factors uncertainty of premises and outcomes. It's a card game where there's reward and punishment, and we find that prefrontal patients, unlike the normal controls, are oblivious to the future consequences of their actions, and they seem to be guided by immediate prospects only. The finding offers for the first time the possibility of detecting these patients' elusive impairment in the lab, measuring it, and actually investigating its causes. So what the experiment is that there's a set of patients. Set A has damage to the prefrontal regions of the brain, and set B doesn't. They're marked on various other parameters. So what we want to do here is that we want to check if they're otherwise intellect is preserved or not, and then check if they and then check our actual hypothesis. So in order to do that, what we do is we calculate their scores on various tests, which are like the cognitive estimations, judgments of recency, uh, perseverativeness, impulsiveness, knowledge base, short-term and working memory, solutions of verbally post social problems, etc. These kind of tests are done on the patients, and we actually found that the results on both the groups are pretty much the same. Then we have to figure out a way to check our actual hypothesis that okay, their intelligence is the same. So how do we check if their actual hypothesis, whether they are able to measure the impact of their actions on the future or not? So what we do is these subjects, both the groups, they sit in front of four decks of cards, which are equal in appearance and size. They're given a fake loan money of $2,000. So what they do is, after turning some cards, the subjects are given money and they pay a penalty. What they do is that the goal of their task is to maximize profit and minimize loss. They are free to switch from one deck to the other. They have to flip cards, and after some flips, they're told what the result is. They're not told ahead of time how many card selections must be made, although we stop it after 100 selections, but they're not told that. The penalty amounts are higher in the cards A and B, and they're lower in the cards C and D. So decks A and B are actually disadvantages because they cost most in the long run, while decks C and D are advantages because they result in an overall gain in the long run. However, immediately it's hard to make out. So what they do is, after this experiment, we find out that the normal controls make more selections from the good cards, and the patients actually make more selections from the bad cards. However, both of them show the initial same behavior while sampling and checking which cards could be disadvantages. But we figure that eventually what happens is that the control group is fine, but the other group actually loses track of this judgment of which card group could be bad. Now we think, okay, that why could this be happening? One thing could be that okay, these patients are so sensitive to the reward that the prospect of future punishment is outweighed, or they're insensitive to punishment. That okay, they only look to current gain, they're not sensitive to what the punishment. The third hypothesis is that irrespective of reward or punishment, they are completely oblivious to the future consequences. It's not about punishment, it's not about loss or gain. So what we do is we reverse the schedules of the card. So instead of immediate reward and later punishment, there's immediate punishment and later reward. And we see that actually the same thing is happening again. They are not paying attention to what the future consequences are. So what happens is instead of working for the current reward in ignoring the punishment later, they work for current punishment and ignore the gains later on. This basically gives us the hypothesis number 3, which is that they are completely oblivious to the future outcomes. It's not about good or bad or profit or loss, it's any future outcome. So what happens is that we think, okay, why could this be happening? So there's two possibilities. One is that their working memory is not holding the outcomes, even though they are detecting the outcomes. The other could be that the representation of future outcomes could be stable, but they would not be marked with a negative or positive value, and thus could not be rejected or accepted. So what we see that okay, our experiment has taken our hypothesis and confirmed our findings. What we then do is we repeat this over a period of time again and again. So in 24 hours later or 6 months later, and actually we found that the observations still hold. The performance remained the same. So basically, we know that okay, they are not taking future consequences into account.